Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for another very special edition of WOWSA Live with Olympic swim coach Chris Morgan. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you. Glad to be here for another talk about some exciting stuff.
Yeah, I'd like you to discuss one of the greatest coaching minds ever, but he isn't really that well known in the United States, correct?
Yeah, so Gennady Touretski was not only one of the greatest coaches, he was, for me, very humbled and very lucky to have been mentored by him. Gennady's story started actually way back, in the Soviet Union. When I'm talking to a lot of my kids and I talk about the Soviet Union, it dates my own self because, of course, I remember the Soviet Union. And Gennady was actually a swimmer. He swam in the Soviet Union, was a national level swimmer, swam, actually, a lot of people don't know this, he swam the 1500 was his specialty. He was a distance swimmer and quite a successful distance swimmer. I don't believe he made an Olympic team. Don't quote me on that. Again, in his very humble nature, he probably would have never talked about it. His father actually used to design submarines for the Soviet Union, and that's a whole nother incredible thing we could talk about one time. But Gennady ended up in Australia. He was the head coach at the AIS, the Australian Institute of Sport. He and his protege Alexander Popov left when the Soviet Union broke up and it became the unified team. They slowly made their way.
So the audience of open water swimmers may not know who Alexander Popov is.
Yeah, so Alexander Popov, excuse me, for all the open water swimmers, the greatest not open water swimmer ever. Probably could have been pretty good actually because of the style of training he did, but he was the world record holder, Olympic champion in the 50 freestyle and the 100 freestyle. Won several world championships, European titles. And so the two of them came over to Australia in the early 90s and after the Barcelona Olympics in 92, and spent quite a few years there. And then in 2002, Gennady moved very discreetly, sort of. He had some differences of opinion with the Australian Swimming Federation, and amicable, decided to, take on a new adventure, and he ended up in Switzerland, and it was just literally the two of them. They ended up in this very small town in Switzerland in 2002 called Makona. It was one of the national training centers in Switzerland of all sports. And believe it or not, they just had a 4-lane, 25-meter pool. And it was kind of their little oasis. No one was there. The pool was almost empty. Swimming wasn't, at the National Training Center at that time, wasn't very, other than doing lifeguarding classes and learn to swim instruction for teachers who wanted to teach swimming lessons. It wasn't very well used, and they started training there. And so
here you have Popov was a two-time 50-meter and 100-meter champion.
Yeah,
Trained in this like nondescript pool.
Oh my God, for me, it was like winning the lottery. It was about a 25-minute drive from the pool where I was coaching. I was involved with the national team in Switzerland, but not yet the national team coach. And I would just go there, and I was just a pool rat. There was this kind of neat balcony that you could just barely stand on, and I would just watch. And after weeks of doing that, finally Gennady kind of signaled down to me, and I came down and we started conversing. I had not ever met him before. Of course, knew who he was. He had no idea who I was. And getting to know him, and getting more to the point of this interesting topic, is one of the things he mentored me on was basically his 4 most important principles on being I would say a high performance, what he would always call high performance athlete or high performance swimmer. And his 4 principles were: number 1, pull-ups. That was his number 1 thing. A swimmer needed to develop strength through pull-ups. And really that was all the other strength stuff he kind of said was, it is very thick, God rest his soul. Unfortunately, we lost Gennady last year, and it was really hard for me because, even though we've lost contact over these years, I moved back to the US about 8 years ago. Gennady was someone I could always rely on to call up and ask a question and get about a 45-minute dissertation on a question. Sometimes I would say, Gennady, could I borrow a pen? And it turned into a discussion about swimming. And he would say, well, you notice this pen looks a little bit like a swimmer in the water. And just incredible. So Gennady really emphasized the importance of pull-ups. And especially one thing that in our conversations, Steve, I didn't mention to you is for female athletes. He really, again, it's, he emphasized the importance for everyone, but especially for female athletes who, just being that, just basic physiology, the female athletes who could do pull-ups were always going to be a better swimmer. So number one, pull-ups, and all different kinds of different variations of pull-ups. The mechanics of whether it's, he called it just a forward pull-up. Some people will call that a chin up. Again, different ways of describing it, or arms facing in, more shoulder width apart, and pulling up from what he called a rear pull-up. So he called these front pull-ups, and he would also have the athletes work, and I saw Alex doing it as well, working with a kind of a large rubber band for an assisted pull-up. He really believed beginning with assisted pull-ups so that you got the mechanics right. He was a very educated man in sports science and human movement, which I studied as well in Switzerland. And he emphasized that, if you use just so simple with a rubber band, the mechanics came more naturally. And then you would take the rubber band away and go from 1 to 2 to 5 to, to multiple pull-ups. And he really never emphasized it was important to do the most, but he emphasized the repetition of it. That if you can do 3, do 3, but do 3 as often as you could. Before practice, after practice, he actually had pull-up bars installed in this pool in Switzerland that weren't there previously.
What
I
about
feel
the
like
grip? I can imagine the grip and the ability for you to really grab the bar would be important, especially for a freestyle swimmer, even butterfly.
Oh yeah, just and I've even thought, from what I learned from Gennady, even think that as a cross-training tool for swimmers, rock climbing, just simple rock climbing, not becoming a rock climber, but some simple skills on rock climbing, just so important, that forearm strength for the anchoring position. And and what Gennady emphasized is his reason for that was, that at the end of a race, whether it's a 50 or crossing the English Channel, he really believed that strength was, now it's becoming more prevalent in swimming, and dry land and strength training is becoming, I think, sometimes maybe too sophisticated. It gets pretty fancy when really just do. Gennady would say again, and his, God rest his soul, just do pull-ups. So that's what he would say. So yeah, so the strength, even for the distance swimmers, and him being a distance swimmer, he knew the importance, and he coached some phenomenal distance swimmers. Being at the Australian Institute of Sport during the sort of the reign of distance swimmers in Australia, I'm sure, and in fact he mentioned it, sort of the influence and the discussions he had with swimmers like Grant Hackett, like Kowalski, I think was his name.
Daniel
Um,
Kowalski, yeah.
yeah, Daniel Kowalski, Kieran Perkins. Kieran Perkins, some of the young swimmers I coach now have no idea who that it was, and it kills me because I'm like, oh my God, this, just some distance phenoms in Australia. So strength important, very important. So 4 concepts: pull-ups, number 1. The number 2 that he taught me is number 2 most important rule, which was not related to pull-ups, but he always used pull-ups to identify. Rule number 2 is when swimmers were free hanging from a pull-up bar, with their legs not touching the ground, he would look at how their hip socket was shaped, or that's what he would call it, the shape of their hip socket, and how their legs would hang in a free hanging position. And athletes who had their feet slightly outwards, or goofy footed, were of course breaststrokers, and so be it. We see that all the time. Swimmers who had their feet parallel, or more or less parallel, were long axis swimmers, freestyle and backstroke. And swimmers who had a slight pigeon toe, when they were just hanging free, he'd always say, "Oh, you're a butterflyer." And if you really look at it, if I recommend any coach who's listening to this, and just have all of your athletes, and you'll probably get an 8 out of 10 of your swimmers will be exactly wherever their hip socket. And so what Gennady would do is, in addition to these pull-ups, of course, pull-ups, whether your feet are out, parallel or in, he'd have you do pull-ups, but he would then train you accordingly for his other two principles, for your stroke, whether you were breaststroke, long axis, or butterfly. And his third important rule, or sort of cardinal rule, was range of motion. And range of motion both on land and in the water. Range of motion, we talk about distance per cycle or distance per stroke. We talk about flexibility. He really brought it together he just called it range of motion. And there are some Gennady Touretski, Alexander Popov videos out there where, they used to use sticks on land, a broomstick, or and just work on range of motion, flexibility, a lot of dynamic moving before workout. Again, a lot of, strength, very educated strength coaches will probably direct you more towards a dynamic warm up before workout in the water, and more of a high intensity stretching routine after practice, just for injury reasons. You don't want to overstretch before you swim, wait for those muscles to be warmed up. So lots and lots. And in fact, one thing, again, Stephen, we didn't talk about, is one of the things he would have, and I promise all of you listening to this, I witnessed it, is Gennady would have Alex Popov in this 25-meter pool lay on the pool, literally on the edge of the pool, where his arm would be draped in the water, and he would have him do 100 freestyle strokes lying on his right side, and then he would lie on his right side and do 100, but working constantly. And this is someone who's already an Olympic champion, listening to the advice of his coach on just the movement of, circling his elbow forward, circling his elbow, constantly feeling that range of motion, and Alex would try to stretch and reach just on the pool. That's such a simple exercise that anyone can do at any pool, anywhere, anytime.
And what was he looking for, the optimal mechanic, or the motion?
Yeah, and different swimmers, Gennady would have them move differently, but he just, that was his gift. That's why he was a genius, and a genie, more than a genius. He was sort of a genie with watching people move and telling them, more or less.
Got it.
I think I got a little bit of that from him, and feel like with some of my athletes, it's I've been able to translate it into their own mechanics. So just range of motion. Now, again, lots of different ways we can get that range of motion, but the range of motion was incredibly important to him. And then the fourth concept, again, related to, starting with those pull-ups, was recovery. But his recovery was one thing: sauna. That was his go-to for recovery. And not only did he preach it, but he required it of all of his athletes and his staff, myself included. We would sauna every Sunday, was sauna. Athletes would do it, of course, at a different time than the coaches. And the coaches, it would, it was the male coaches sitting around, as you can imagine. It's a European culture, so a little bit different. Here in the US, we're probably not as accustomed to that, but I had probably some of the most incredible educational seminars in my entire coaching career, sitting in that sauna with Gennady Touretski and other coaches, listening to, kind of old war stories, but while we were in there. And now, why I think it's so important, recovery, is now we see it coming back into swimming, both in pool and in open water. And many of you might know, if you've ever heard me or worked with me or seen me or talked to me, I'm a big believer in Katsu and the recovery we can get from Katsu. So I think that if Gennady, unfortunately, I've never had the opportunity. We spoke about it briefly, but never had the chance. I'm sure he would, much as somebody incredible like Ben Greenfield, who uses Katsu in the sauna, infrared sauna. Gennady would have been a big believer in Katsu, because it helps your range of motion, helps you get pull-up strength. So imagine these 4 principles of Gennady with Katsu. You can do all of them.
Got it.
So yeah, that's his was his belief, is his belief, is my belief, and incredibly fortunate that I got the chance to not only learn about it, but work alongside him and witness those 4 principles. Pull-ups. So I tell any swimming coach, they say, what is a great way to have your swimmers get stronger? Do pull-ups. I mean, it's so simple, but so important. And I almost feel hypocritical because I don't think I do it enough with my athletes.
Got it. So I'm interested in Popov when you were standing there watching this amazing athlete do workouts. What were some of the interesting things that you saw him do that were unusual, were rare, or showed his athleticism?
Well, I tell you, so incredible is, so they moved to Switzerland it was the summer of 2002, about a year before the World Championships in 2003, which were in Barcelona. And the Barcelona World Championships were very important to both Gennady and to Alex because it was 11 years. Uh, that would be the 11-year anniversary when he was Olympic champion in Barcelona in 1992. So they really were hoping to do well at that meet, and they prepared for those 11 months in this 4-lane 25-meter pool. Honestly, I don't, again, we don't have Gennady here anymore. Unfortunately, we could ask Alex. I could even, I could find out from him. But I don't think he did any training 50 meters prior to that World Championships. In fact, I could almost guarantee it. They did do some racing, but here's some incredible things he did: pull-ups, very simple. Again, it makes me laugh because Gennady referred to it as calisthenics. They did a lot of calisthenics on the pool deck, whether it be jumping jacks or very simple sit-ups. It's so basic, but the intensity of it and the duration of it was mind-blowing. Like not just like, oh, 5 minutes, like 45 minutes.
Oh, wow.
One thing Gennady would have Alex do is they would do, and a lot of people again don't know this about Alex. He was Alexander Popov was a backstroker in his early career, and they would do a lot of backstroke with. If you've seen swimmers or any of you swimmers out there have worked with a pull buoy, they would add the band around the ankles, so it's just like a big rubber band. A lot of different, Finis has one. Perform Better has one, lots of, but just a band. Now, in the Soviet Union, they didn't, they would just tie an old bicycle tube around their ankles. And they would do what they called band only 2000 for time. I guarantee I've witnessed it and seen it and blown away at how fast Alex would go. They would do a 2000 for time band only, no pull buoy. So working on balancing the body forward and swimming with great range of motion. And I challenge any swimmer to do it, not even for time, just complete a 2000-meter short course meters with a band only. And sometimes they would do it all backstroke. Sometimes they would do it freestyle, but saw him do that exact exercise. They would do a lot of all out 50s, warm up 1,000, 1,500 meters, and then warm up and do 650s all out for time. And that was the workout. They would take 5-10 minutes. There was never an interval. We get so caught up in intervals. They would go when he was ready. That's when they would do the next one. So not every 15 minutes, not every 10 minutes. Okay, coach. And the relationship between the two of them was the respect. You don't see it anymore. It's unfortunate. The respect between athlete and coach with Gennady and Alex was something that it's you don't see it very often anymore. I think it's sort of a lost art, and I think that's why they were so successful. So, very simple things, but the message was clear from Gennady, and the delivery from the athlete was equally clear. He would perform. So, as simple as that sounds, 2000 for time band only.
Thank you very much, Chris, for all of this. This is
Yeah.
really interesting, and look forward to your next talk, which I'd like to be on Richard Quick.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That one might take a long time.
Okay.
Because he's sort of another, just not another genius, just a genie, really. Just people who have magic powers.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Do some pull-ups, everyone. Just one.